Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Spring Book Clubs. I'm Susan Maguire, Senior Editor, Collection Management and Library Outreach here at Booklist. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some technical details. The audience is in listen-only mode, but we welcome any questions you may have. On the bottom of your screen is a toolbar with a section for Q&A. If you have a question or need technical assistance, simply click Q&A and type your message into the box that appears. We will do our best to respond to all tech-related questions, and we'll pass along all other questions to today's panelists so they can follow up with you after the webinar. And we'll also have some time for some Q&A at the end, possibly. Links to today's slides and title list were included in the reminder email you received from Zoom 1 hour ago. To download them, please open that email, scroll to the bottom, and click on the links located there. You can also download these materials at any time by copying the URLs on this screen into your web browser. Today, we have the pleasure of hearing from Ellen Whitaker, Marketing Associate at Bloomsbury Publishing, Margaret Coffey, National Accounts Manager at Sourcebooks, and Golda Rademacher, Library Sales and Marketing Director at W.W. Norton Company. First, we'll hear from Ellen Whitaker. Ellen is a Marketing Associate at Bloomsbury Publishing, where she has worked for over 4 years. A graduate of the Columbia Publishing course, she previously worked at Workman Publishing and as a bookseller at Sundog Books in Florida. Welcome, Ellen. The floor is yours.
Right. Hi, everyone. I'm filling in for my director, Laura Keefe, today, so you'll see her email on all of our slides, but feel free to email either of us. Mine is ellen.whitaker@bloomsbury.com. I will also put my email in the chat. Just a reminder that we are a Macmillan distribution client. All of our galleys are available on Edelweiss and NetGalley, and we do have some print available. A link will be in the chat to request print arcs as well. Okay, I'm going to start with nonfiction today. A little something for everyone. So starting off is Elderhood. It's a New York Times bestseller, now coming in paperback. It's nonfiction book club perfection. Harvard-trained physician Louise Aronson uses stories from her quarter century of caring for elderly patients and draws from history, science, literature, popular culture, and her own life to weave a vision of old age, that's neither nightmare nor utopian fantasy. A vision full of joy, wonder, frustration, outrage, and hope about aging, medicine, and humanity itself. It's reminiscent of Oliver Sacks. Elderhood is for anyone who is, in the author's own words, an aging, i.e. still breathing human being. Next slide. Girlhood. This just received a starred Booklist review this week. It is the second starred review for it as well. For readers of Maggie Nelson and Leslie Jamison, in Girlhood, critically acclaimed author Melissa Febos and Lambda Literary Award recipient examines the narratives women are told about what it means to be a girl and the realities of growing up female in a world that prioritizes the feelings, perceptions, and power of men at girls' expense. It is a book she wishes she had been handed as a teenager. Likewise, you can think of it as a sort of prequel to Three Women. Next slide. The second. This is essential social justice reading. It's coming out in June. I'm so thrilled to tell you about the second by our star, best-selling beloved author Carol Anderson. Her first book, White Rage, has found a whole new readership in 2020 and now 2021, and this will be bigger. It is the perfect match of subject and author and feels incredibly urgently relevant. Perfect for book clubs looking for social justice reading. The second refers to the Second Amendment. As Carol points out, regardless of which legal interpretation of the Second Amendment is invoked, whether an individual's right to bear arms or the collective right to a well-regulated militia, each has been used against Black Americans since it was organized. Unlike the other amendments in the Bill of Rights, the inherent flaw in the Second Amendment is that its primary function from the beginning was to curtail Black Americans' rights. The second is neither a pro-gun nor anti-gun book. The lens is the citizenship rights and humanity rights of African Americans. In the book, Carol makes the case as clearly and inarguably as she did in White Rage that the problem in the end is that the Second Amendment is ultimately not about guns, but anti-Blackness. Next slide. Kin, an incredible memoir by a native daughter of Appalachia. Shauna is a nurse, mom of 5, and community college teacher. She was the upteenth generation of her family born in the hills of eastern Kentucky, 300 years worth of her kin occupying that oft overlooked area of the United States. When she was 5, her father, a Vietnam vet looking for some healing, moved their family to an intense, oppressive religious community in Minnesota. Shauna was a willful girl, and she was frequently punished and treated harshly. After she was sexually assaulted by an older member of the community, her family fled Minnesota to return home. Their area of Kentucky has been ravaged by the coal industry, but is rich in family and tradition. This is excellent for book clubs and a very strong recommendation for people who loved Educated. Next slide, please. The Apology. From V, the best-selling feminist writer formerly known as Eve Ensler, The Apology is coming in paperback this summer. It received LJ and Booklist star reviews in hardcover. Like millions of women, Eve Ensler has been waiting much of her life for an apology. Sexually and physically abused by her father, Eve has struggled her whole life from this betrayal, longing for an honest reckoning from a man who is long dead. After years of work as an anti-violence advocate, she decided she would wait no longer. An apology could be imagined by her, for her, to her. It will, whenever Broadway reopens, will be a one-man show played by an actor playing her father, written by Eve, and produced by an incredible team. Next slide, please. Zori. Zori feels like an antidote to now, calmer, quieter, more beautiful, and pure. Set in Indiana, it starts with Zori taking a job painting radium watch faces in a factory during the Great Depression. It follows this hardworking, soulful character through her long life. Spanning an entire lifetime, a life convulsed and transformed by the events of the 20th century, Laird Hunt's extraordinary novel offers a profound and intimate portrait of the dreams that propel one tenacious woman onward and the losses that she cannot outrun. Set against a harsh, gorgeous, quintessentially American landscape, this is a deeply empathetic and poetic novel that belongs on a shelf with the classics of Marilyn Robinson and Elizabeth Strout. Next slide, please. Old Love Good Girls. Gail Godwin is a beloved author of book club titles, and this one is perfect. Two roommates met at Lovegood Commuter Junior College for Girls in 1958. Farron, who has narrowly escaped from a dark past, instantly takes to her new roommate, Mary, and her composed personality. Surrounded by the traditions of Lovegood, the girls and their friendship begin to thrive, but underneath their friendship is a dark, fierce bond. 10 years later, Farron and Mary haven't spoken since college. Life has led them into vastly different worlds, and when each woman finds herself in need of the other's essence, that spark, that remarkable affinity unbroken by time, between them is reignited, their lives begin to shift as a result. Next slide, please. A Court of Silver Flames. Some of you may be familiar with Sarah J. Maas's hugely best-selling YA fantasy romance series, A Court of Thorns and Roses. If not, there is no better writer today combining epic fantasy, thrilling adventure, and steamy romance. This new book will be published as an adult hardcover, even though the first books in the series were YA. Just to reiterate, this is an adult book, not a YA book. Sarah's first adult novel, Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood, came out in March of 2020 and was a hit. The ACOTAR series is crossing over because it follows the original protagonist's older sister, Nesta, who is in her 20s. And it also allows Sarah a free hand with the many romantic scenes in this book. As they say in the movies, contains adult content. Set in the world of A Court of Thorns and Roses, starting shortly after the epic war that wrapped up the last novel, this is the sexy, thrilling novel Sarah's fans have been clamoring for. It follows Nesta, who has always been prickly, proud, swift to anger, and slow to forgive. The one person who ignites her temper more than any other is Cassian, the battle-scarred warrior who is constantly in Nesta's orbit. But her temper isn't the only thing Cassian ignites. The fire between them is undeniable, and it only burns hotter as they are forced into close quarters with each other. Against the sweeping backdrop of a world seared by war and plagued with uncertainty, Nesta and Cassian battle monsters from within and without as they search for acceptance and healing in each other's arms. Next slide, please. House of Earth and Blood. Also from Sarah J. Maas, the first book in the brand new adult fantasy romance adventure series. It debuted at #1 on the New York Times list. It just won the Goodreads Choice Award for Fantasy and has been a PW bestseller all year. Everything that Sarah does best: intricate world building, fun, relatable characters, plentiful sexual tension, witty banter, and a massive final set piece that rivals any battle in any classic fantasy novel. Crescent City 2 comes out in 2022. Just to note, both Sourcebooks we do not have ARCs for, but we just wanted to let you know about them. So next slide, please. Paradise, Nevada. From a debut author, former professional poker player, Dario Diavebi. Paradise, Nevada is the story of 4 transplants braving the deceptive, spectacular, endlessly self-reinventing city of Las Vegas. 6 months before a bomb detonates in a mammoth hotel on the Las Vegas Strip, a crop of strivers congregate on the desert city, attempting to make home amidst the dizzying lights. They include a professional poker player, a cocktail waitress, a tourist, a journalist for the Las Vegas Sun. The explosion sets them on converging, surprising paths. A sprawling, rowdy, and ricocheting saga about power, happiness, and class. Paradise, Nevada is a panoramic tour of America in miniature, where the bloody battles in neoliberalism, immigration, labor, and family are all rage underneath Las Vegas's lights. Next slide, please. The mysteries. This follows 2 young girls, best friends, whose families are also very closely intertwined in a suburb of St. Louis in the 70s. Miggy is a wild and reckless 7-year-old, and Ellen is polite and cautious, a compliment to her bolder friend. The girls take risks in their play. Their parents are sort of classic true crime documentary 70s parents who are highly laissez-faire. Their daring play is led by Miggy, and when a great tragedy strikes, everyone has to grapple with the consequences. This is a great comp for Ask Again Yes, or books by Teresa M. Fowler or Alice McDermott. It has a high-profile HBO show feeling with its depictions of complicated parents and childhood friendship and loss. Marissa has had bestsellers before, especially with Mary Quinn, and is beloved by book clubs, and this hits that spot perfectly. Next slide, please. The Kingdoms. What if I told you I had a book coming in May 2021 that was a thrilling naval adventure complete with battles, press gangs, and a probably insane pirate sea captain, an amnesiac quest to recover his lost memories, an aching slow burn love story, a lovingly crafted historical fantasy of 19th century England and Scotland with light steampunk elements, all wrapped up in a time travel adventure, a desperate attempt to ensure that the course of world history stays true, that elegantly and devastatingly grapples with the tough questions and plot points of altering the past and the future. The Kingdoms is all of these things. Natasha has a cult following from her previous novels, especially The Watchmaker of Filigree Street, but this is bigger and more epic than anything she's done so far. It's sure to be her breakout. Recommended for people who love David Mitchell, but also twisty time warping novels like The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. Next slide, please. Okay, The Vanishing Sky. For your groups who can't get enough World War II historical fiction, this one has an interesting angle. It's based on the author's real-life family history. Her father was from Germany, and he did in fact desert from the Hitler Youth, which he had been recruited. A mother's story of trying to survive and keep her average family together during horrific war and the toll it takes on the non-Nazi, non-Jewish German citizens. This will be out in paperback this summer. Next slide, please. And the last one, this is Happiness. It's a very steady hardcover seller driven by word of mouth enthusiasm, a lovely lyrical Irish escape. It's coming this summer in paperback. It was named a best book of the year by the Washington Post and Real Simple. In it, change is coming to Fa, a small Irish parish unaltered in 1,000 years. They're getting electricity. Harking back to a simpler time, this is Happiness as a tender portrait of a community, its idiosyncrasies and traditions, its paradoxes and kindnesses, its
Uh-oh, Ellen, I think we lost you. Are you there? Okay, so Ellen has been abducted by aliens. Just kidding. I'm sure she's just having a small technical problem. So let's move ahead. Can you show us their last slide? And there we go. All right. So we'll give Ellen a chance to talk about that last book at the end. So thank you for all you presented, Ellen. And next, we're going to hear from Margaret Coffey. Margaret is what you call a senior publishing professional, having toiled in both sales and marketing for decades. Before joining Sourcebooks 5 years ago, she worked at a variety of publishers on such properties as Harry Potter and The Hunger Games. Maybe you've heard of those. She reads various genres and especially loves contemporary fiction and historical titles, and is currently enjoying being a member of 2 book clubs. Take it away, Margaret.
Thank you so much, Susan, and greetings from Chicago. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to tell you about a few of our favorite upcoming adult fiction and nonfiction titles, which are perfect for book clubs. Next slide. I hope you will download our galleys on NetGalley and Edelweiss to read our new titles and visit our website to sign up for one of our newsletters. Next. Many of our authors would be happy to join your book clubs from around the world. Please let us know if you'd like to schedule a visit. Next, and please feel free to request a copy of our book club picks guide online or in print. And next again, now on to Sourcebooks landmark fiction titles, starting with, next slide, Black Widows. Everyone always suspects the spouse, but what happens when there are three sister wives, one dead husband? Did his wife kill him? If so, which one? Against the wishes of his family and the laws of the elders of the Mormon Church, Blake Nelson has adopted the old polygamous ways and lives alone with his 3 wives miles from anywhere in rural Utah. Blake and his wives kept to themselves and kept most folks out. That is, until his dead body is discovered. Black Widows is told in 3 voices of Blake's very different wives who hate each other and who sometimes hated their husband. The only thing that they had in common was Blake, until all 3 are accused of his murder. When Blake is found dead under the desert sun, all 3 wives become suspect, not only to the police, but to each other. As the investigation draws them closer, each wife must decide who can be trusted. With stories surfacing of a notorious cult tucked away in the hills, whispers flying about a 4th wife, and evidence that can't quite explain what has been keeping Blake busy, the 3 widows face a reckoning that might shatter all they know to be true. Cate Quinn is a best-selling historical thriller novelist in the UK under the name C.S. Quinn. You may know her Charlie Tuesday series from Thomas and Mercer, UK. Next slide. When you're a mother with power, money, and status, is there any line you wouldn't cross for your child? The Admissions Meets Big Little Lies in Girls with Bright Futures, a Black comedy of 3 prep school families locked in competition for a single spot at Stanford. When an attempted murder reveals the dark underbelly of their privileged community, one can't help but wonder if there's any line the mothers wouldn't cross. Alicia's a tech giant, wealthy beyond compare. Kelly is a stay-at-home mother and Stanford legacy. Marin makes 3, single, broke, and out of place among the rich and elite. While all of their daughters are natural choices for Stanford, the school they attend can only recommend 1 student. As the competition heats up, an attempt is made on one of the girls' lives, and panic spirals within the community. Now the mothers have to decide if one of them is capable of murder, and even worse, capable of crossing every line to get ahead. Next slide. In The Girls in the Stilt House, murder breaks through the racial divide that separates 2 teenage girls, forging an unlikely friendship in this Southern debut. Ada promised herself she would never go back to the trace, to her unbearable life on the swamp, and to her harsh father in Mississippi. But now, after running away to Baton Rouge and briefly knowing a different kind of life, she finds herself with nowhere to go but back home, and she knows there will be a price to pay with her father. Matilda, daughter of a sharecropper, is from the other side of the trace, doing what she can to protect her family from the whims and demands of some particularly callous locals is an ongoing struggle. She forms a plan to go north, to pack up the secrets she's holding about her life in the South and hang them on the line for all to see. As the 2 girls are drawn deeper into a dangerous world of bootleggers and moral corruption, they must come to terms with the complexity of their tenuous bond and a hidden past that links them in ways that could cost them their lives. Debut novelist Kelly Mustian grew up in Natchez, Mississippi, and currently lives near the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains in North Carolina. Next slide. At a time when women are expected to live in the shadows of great men, one woman chooses to step into the light in the girl in his shadow. When Dr. Croft takes in orphan Eleanor Beatty, he doesn't realize he's gained an apprentice. Raised amidst cross experiments, Nora becomes his most trusted assistant, an unthinkable and unlawful pursuit for a woman. Nora helps cross groundbreaking research and his clinic gain recognition, and she finds she doesn't mind working in the background as long as she can contribute to hone her skills. But the arrival of a new surgical resident threatens to undo all that Nora has strived for. Dr. Daniel Gibson is too proper to be trusted, too skilled to dismiss, and too smart to be fooled for long. He expects Nora to change her clothes before dinner and spend her evenings perfecting her needlework, not her sutures. Though Nora knows it's best not to reveal her expansive knowledge of human anatomy, she isn't going to give up on the work that fascinates and fulfills her, no matter what it costs her. Next slide. The War Nurse is a stunning tale based on a true story of one nurse in France during World War I who must battle the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. From Tracy Anderson Wood, the author of The Engineer's Wife, comes the story of Superintendent of Nurses Julia Stimson and 65 inexperienced young nurses who arrive on the front lines of World War I to find chaos. With 1,300 soldiers stuffed into a facility built for 500, providing even the most basic care is challenging, and Julia quickly learns that male doctors see her as a threat to their authority. Based on a true story, the war nurse follows Julia through World War I in France, while the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic overwhelms medical resources. Julia must confront an unthinkable choice: to challenge her profession and risk her hard-won career, or to let the people she loves die in her arms. Next slide. From Leah Weiss, the acclaimed author of The Creek Don't Rise, comes All the Little Hopes, a Southern story of friendship, mystery, and the complex nature of right and wrong. At a time when girls' aspirations are limited, Lucy and Bert seek adventure, resolving to find and solve the small mysteries of Riverton, North Carolina. Their chance arises when a man goes missing, a woman goes crazy, and a mystic gives the girls a mystery to solve that takes them beyond the ordinary. This quiet town, seasoned with honeybees and sweet tea, becomes a Nazi prisoner of war camp, and the once gentle place now ripples with underlying tension. More men go missing, and together the girls embark on a journey to answer the ultimate question: do they know who the enemy really is? Next slide. In My Dreams, I Hold a Knife is an addictive, propulsive debut read from novelist Ashley Winstead. It doesn't matter who you are now, it matters who you were and what you did, and now it's time to pay. Jessica Miller plans to triumphantly return to Duquesne University for her 10-year reunion festivities. She's the most successful out of her entire group of friends, and she's ready to flaunt her achievements, even though her friend group, known on campus as the East House 7, doesn't really exist anymore. 10 years ago, Heather, one of their own, was murdered, fracturing the once close-knit group. And then another friend was accused of committing the vile act, shattering whatever friendly feelings remained. Jessica thinks she's coming back to campus to bask in a wave of glory. She and her friends have no idea that someone has set an elaborate trap to catch the real killer and close the cold case for good. Next slide. And now I'd like to introduce you to some of our new nonfiction titles. Next slide. I Am the Rage is a poetry collection that explores racial injustice from the raw, unfiltered viewpoint of a Black woman in America. Dr. Martina McGowan's poetry provides insights that no think piece on racism can, and challenges readers to feel, reflect, and face what it means to be a Black American. This entire collection was created during 2020 after the deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. Dr. McGowan is a mother of two, a grandmother of three, a recently retired physician, chief medical officer, writer, mentor, blogger, artist, and occasional poet. Next slide. The Girl Explorers is the untold story of women who broke the rules, trekked the globe, and changed the world. In 1932, Roy Chapman Andrews, the president of the Explorers Club, told hundreds of female students at Barnard College that women in exploration could never mix. He obviously didn't know a thing about either. The Girl Explorers is the inspirational and untold story of the women who broke apart the stuffy men's club and founded the Society of Women Geographers, and how some key members, including Blair Niles, Amelia Earhart, Gloria Hollister, and Anna Hayward Taylor, paved the way for women scientists by scaling mountains, exploring the seas, flying across the Atlantic, and recording the world through film, sculpture, and art. Jane Zangleen retraced the footsteps of some of the girls' explorers' international travels in researching this book. She's a labor lawyer and law professor. Next slide. For readers of Hidden Figures and Something Wonderful, Footnotes is the story of New York in the Roaring '20s and the first Broadway show with an all-Black cast and creative team to achieve success and its impact on our popular culture. Amidst a culture actively whitewashing, controlling, or trying to prevent the stories from being told, these artists changed the course of American entertainment. This groundbreaking group of performers and the creators, including composer U.B. Blake and lyricist Noble Cecil, sowed the seeds of the Harlem jazz scene and paved the way for people of color on stage and screen, ultimately leading to productions such as West Side Story, Black Panther, and of course, Hamilton. Writer Cassine Gaines had unprecedented access to families of the cast and crew and obtained personal photographs and behind-the-scenes information. Next slide. Cate Moore is back. That's really all I could say. I could just move on to the next slide, but let's talk about this wonderful book. The New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of The Radium Girls has crafted The Woman They Could Not Silence, a fascinating new story of a woman who changed the world. 1860. As the clash between the states rolls slowly to a boil, Elizabeth Packard, housewife and mother of 6, is facing her own battle. The enemy sits across the table and sleeps in the next room. Threatened by Elizabeth's intellect, independence, and outspokenness, her husband of 21 years is plotting against her and makes a plan to put her back in her place. One summer morning, he has her committed to an insane asylum. The horrific conditions inside the Illinois State Hospital in Jacksonville, Illinois, are overseen by Dr. Andrew McFarland, a man who will prove to be even more dangerous to Elizabeth than her traitorous husband. But most disturbing is that Elizabeth is not the only sane woman confined to the institution. There are many rational women on her ward who tell the same story. They've been committed not because they need medical treatment, but to keep them in line, conveniently labeled crazy, so their voices are ignored. No one is willing to fight for their freedom, and disenfranchised both by gender and the stigma of their supposed madness, they cannot possibly fight for themselves. But Elizabeth is about to discover that the merit of losing everything is that you then have nothing to lose. Next slide. On our Poison Pen Press mystery imprint, Of One Blood is a groundbreaking tale of racism, identity, and spirituality. Next slide. By American author Pauline Hopkins. When Roel Briggs, a medical student at Harvard, witnesses the performance of the beautiful singer Diantha Lusk at a concert, he's infatuated by her talent and beauty. The next morning, Roel is called to treat the victims of a train accident. Among them is Diantha, seemingly dead, but he revives her using a form of mesmerism. Roel falls in love with her and proposes marriage. Wanting to provide for his fiancée, he undertakes a dangerous but lucrative archaeological expedition to Ethiopia, where he discovers more than treasure. Now his special abilities begin to make sense as he learns the truth about his ancestors. First serialized in Colored American Magazine in 1902, this narrative exemplifies Pauline Hopkins' incisive writing and interrogates issues of race and history that remain urgent today. This edition is presented by the Horror Writers Association and introduced by award-winning author Nisi Shawl. The book includes notes, biographical information about the author, discussion questions for classroom use, and suggested further reading. Next slide. From international best-selling author of The Face on the Milk Carton, Caroline B. Cooney, comes The Grandmother Plot. This is the story of a young man who can't seem to straighten out his life, and his beloved grandmother who can't seem to remember hers, and the shadowy threat that hangs over them both. Freddie leads a life of little responsibility. His mother is dead, his sisters are far flung across the globe, and he can't quite work up enough motivation to find himself a girlfriend. But his memory-challenged grandmother lives in a nursing home nearby, and Freddie visits her often, simultaneously cherishing and hating the time he spends with the grandmother he always adored, who is now a ghost of her former self. When another elderly woman is murdered in the nursing home, Freddie panics. His grandmother needs too much care for him to bring her home. His sisters are calling and texting him constantly, pressuring him to find a new home to transfer her to. And a slight wrinkle in a side business that he's been working on, which may not be legal in the strictest sense of the word, is causing extra complications that could turn out to be deadly. The grandmother plot is a lively companion to Caroline's 2020 title, Before She Was Helen. Next slide. And next slide again. And finally, from our Casa Romance line, The Girl with Stars in Her Eyes. Growing up, Tony Bennett's guitar was her only companion until she met Sebastian Quick. Seb was a little older, a lot wiser, and he became Tony's way out, promising they'd escape their small town together. Then Seb turned 18 and split without looking back. Now Tony B is all grown up and making a name for herself in Philadelphia's indie music scene. When a friend suggests she try out for the hottest new band in the country, she decides to take a chance, not realizing this opportunity will bring her face to face with the boy who broke her heart and nearly stole her dreams. Author Zio Axelrod is a singer and songwriter and has written a special new song to accompany this book. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great day. I hope to see you at ALA Midwinter, and feel free to email me for any further information.
I would like information on where to hear that song. So before we move on, let's let Ellen talk about her last book.
Hi, everyone. I'm so sorry about that.
We're getting a little reminder of what we saw.
All right. Okay. So this is Happiness, a very steady hardcover seller driven by word of mouth enthusiasm, a lovely lyrical Irish escape. It's coming paperback this summer. It was named a best book of the year by the Washington Post and Real Simple. In it, change is coming to Fa, a small Irish parish unaltered in 1,000 years. They're getting electricity. Harking back to a simpler time, this is Happiness and Traditions. Its paradoxes and each tale like no other. It's luminous and lyrical. It is a lovely, unforgettable read. And that's it from me. Thank you all for attending the webinar, and please fill out my Google form to request any books you may want, and also feel free to email me at ellen.whitaker@bloomsbury.com. Thank you so much.
Okay, another audio adventure. Thank you, Ellen, and thank you, Margaret, for all those great Sourcebooks books. Our final panelist today will be Golda Rademacher. Golda started as a sales assistant at Norton 20 years ago. She's now the director of library sales and marketing, which seems appropriate considering both her parents were librarians. One of her fond childhood memories is of helping her mom do inventory back in the old card catalog days. That's kind of a dream. You can find Golda on Twitter and Instagram at www.nortonlibrary, and she also sends out a monthly email newsletter for library staff. Take it away, Golda.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Susan. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. So you can find more Book Buzz videos from me on my brand new YouTube channel at bit.ly/YouTube Norton. Today, I'm going to talk mostly about books that are coming out this spring and summer. So if you want to hear about books that are coming out sooner, check out the Booklist Book Club's webinar from this past October, or my videos on YouTube. And you're welcome to email me with any questions. Next slide. Okay, I'm just going to start with fiction. Go to the next one. Thank you. The House on Vesper Sands just published today. And this moody Victorian mystery is the first Tin House book to make it on the library reads list. So thank you to all of the early supporters. And if you have a book club that enjoys very atmospheric historical mysteries, check out this one. We also have exciting news for The 5 Wounds by Kirsten Valdez Quaid, which was just chosen as a July 2021 pick for Roxanne Gay's new book club. And Library Journal also just gave it a star review, calling it expertly crafted. This story of family and community introduces us to often needy characters for whom readers come to care deeply. Hold Fast by J.H. Galernter. So Star Lawrence is the editor at Norton who published Patrick O'Brien's Aubrey Maturin series in the USA. And ever since that series became a huge hit, he has received proposals for the next great naval fiction series or the follow-up to Patrick O'Brien. but he has said no to all of them until now. Hold Fast is nautical fiction, espionage thriller, and full of nonstop action. You can be confident in recommending this to your fans of Aubrey Maturin or Horatio Hornblower, or even fans of espionage authors like Ian Fleming. And you don't need to know tons of nautical terms or a naval history to be swept up by the story. And the good news, we have the second book in the series signed up already. And then just a note, since I mentioned Patrick O'Brien, Norton is reissuing the full series in paperback with lovely new covers over the next few years because people just continue to discover and read these books. Unsettled Ground is the new novel by Claire Fuller, author of Our Endless Numbered Days, Swimming Lessons, and Bitter Orange. In this harrowing novel, Fuller builds the tale of sacrifice and hope, of homelessness and hardship, of love and survival, in which two marginalized and remarkable people work to uncover long-held family secrets, and in their own way, repair, recover, and begin again. Fuller is based in England, but with the magic of online events, she is going to be on an author panel for librarians that we're doing along with Workman and Harlequin this Thursday to introduce you to the new book. All the Water I've Seen Is Running by Elias Rodriguez is a debut novel. Daniel Enriquez is a gay man living in New York, but when the girl he loved back in high school dies, he returns to Florida to mourn her and to confront the man he thinks was responsible for her death. He gets together with his old track team buddies and their girlfriends and reckons with his old friendships and his own identity. All the Water I've Seen Is Running illuminates the complexities of class, race, and sexuality in the American South and in Jamaica, where Daniel's family originated. We have this lovely quote from Justin Torres that you can see on the slide. He called the book a mesmerizing look at friendship and loss. Site Fidelity is a debut story collection by Claire Boyles. So I enjoy short stories because you can read just one if you don't have a lot of time, and then pick up the book easily to start a new story whenever you have a chance. These stories all include the natural world in some way, and they span the decades from the 1970s to a plausible near future. There's a 74-year-old nun who turns to eco-sabotage to stop a fracking project. An ornithologist returns home to care for her rancher father and gets caught up trying to protect a breeding group of endangered Gunnison sage grouse. A woman delivers her own baby in a Nevada ghost town. And a young farmer hides her chicken flock from the government during a bird flu epidemic. Good for readers of Pam Houston and Annie Proulx, Site Fidelity evokes the bleakness and beauty of our threatened Western landscapes in lean lyrical prose. It introduces unforgettable characters who must confront the challenges of caregiving and loss, alongside the very practical impacts of fracking, water rights law, and other agricultural policies, all aspects of life on the shifting terrain of our changing planet. To Storm Wood by Philip Gray is a historical novel set just after the end of World War I. Amy Vannick's fiancé is missing and presumed dead. Amy travels to the desolate battlefields of northern France to learn his fate and recover his body. She's warned that this open-air morgue is no place for a civilian, much less a woman, but Amy is willing to brave the barbed wire, the putrid water, and the rat-infested tunnels that dot the landscape. Her search is upended when she discovers the scene of a gruesome mass murder. Soon, Amy begins to have suspicions that her fiancé Edward might not be dead. Disquieting and yet compulsively readable, To Storm Wood builds to an ending that is both thrilling and emotionally riveting. On my next slide, the Norton sales reps, as you can probably imagine, are huge readers, and they are always way ahead of me on our seasonal reading. At our sales conference, all of them said they loved Mrs. March. So of course I had to hurry up and read it. I read it in one day, wondering if Mrs. March was losing her mind, Was she being drugged? Was her husband gaslighting her? Well, I'm not going to tell you, but I will say that the actress and producer, Elizabeth Moss, has already optioned this book for her production company, and she said that she was so captured by it that she knew she had to play Mrs. March. This is a slow burn psychological suspense novel with a killer ending. There's an ARC giveaway in my ALA Midwinter virtual booth and in the Publishers Weekly Grab a Galley feature for ALA Midwinter. And you can also find digital ARCs on Edelweiss. Norton will start distributing mysterious press titles this May, and our first one is Basil's War by Stephen Hunter. This is an espionage thriller set during World War II with a deliciously debauched spy as the protagonist. And next, Scarlet is a new imprint from Penzler Publishers, and these are mostly psychological thrillers, and Saving Grace comes out in March. And then we have Finding Tessa, which is one of those Gone Girl-esque thrillers where there's a complete change in your understanding of the characters halfway through the book. But in this one, you do end up liking the characters. And then also from Scarlet is Black Ice, which is from a best-selling Swedish author known for her Hammarby series. This will be good for readers of Tana French, Camilla Lackberg, Sarah Bladel, and Henning Mankell. And on my next slide, I have a plug for the American Mystery Classics series from Penzler Publishers. I made an Edelweiss catalog of all the books so far that you can find through that bit.ly link on the screen. If you have any mystery book clubs who want to take a dive into some classic titles from the 1920s and 30s, they can surely find something interesting here. And now for some paperbacks. I just want to highlight a few titles that are coming out in paperback this summer that I think would be good for book clubs. The Rationing by Charles Whelan was published in hardcover in 2019. This is a satirical thriller about a mysterious illness that has the country scrambling because the government supply of Dormagen, the silver bullet of pharmaceuticals, has been depleted just as demand begins to spike. So if you are in the headspace where you want to read about the political machinations behind dealing with a fictional pandemic and the international repercussions of trying to get more medicine, here is one for you. The Stone Girl came out this past summer, and it's a page-turning thriller that features strong women getting revenge on some truly terrible men. There are a lot of twists and some satisfying scenes as the women dig to find out what is going on at the Mohawk Club and how they can protect themselves from this group of horrible men. The Hunters is a reissue of two novellas by Claire Massoud, the author of The Burning Girl and The Emperor's Children, and this will include a reading group guide printed in the book. Living Nations, Living Words is an anthology of First Peoples poetry edited by Joy Harjo. This is part of her Poet Laureate project and will have an interactive online component. One of the ideas of the anthology is to show the breadth of Native poets writing today and celebrate their vital and unequivocal contributions to American poetry. This will be a good companion to the anthology that came out this past August. And if you tune into the President's Program at ALA Midwinter on Sunday, January 24th, you'll get to hear a conversation between Joy Harjo and her editor at Norton, Jill Bielowski. And now I'd like to tell you about some new nonfiction titles for your informational book clubs. We Need New Stories by Nesreen Malik is something that we all need right now. Malik examines the political myths that are used to deflect and discredit demands for social justice, like identity politics, the idea that there is a free speech crisis, the slippery slope argument, and whataboutery. She picks apart how these myths spread and how they are adopted across our media and popular culture. She identifies the tools and the rhetorical sleights of hand that sustain these myths and are used time and again to halt demands for change. A version of this book was published in the UK already to much praise, and now Malik has fully revised it for the US audience. Letter to a Young Female Physician is a memoir by a doctor that tackles everything from imposter syndrome and sexism to body image, confidence, the conflicting demands of being a doctor and a wife, and some stories about working with COVID patients. Suzanne Coven published an essay with the same title in the New England Journal of Medicine a few years ago, and the essay ended up being shared around the world, and she received thousands of responses from women and men, and not all in the medical field. So that's what made her decide to write her memoir. Even though the memoir is specific to her own experiences as a woman, a doctor, and a teacher, there are a lot of universal elements that I think people in other fields will identify with. What Happened to Paula is a riveting investigation into a cold case that asks how much control women have over their bodies and the direction of their lives. In July 1970, 18-year-old Paula Oberbreckling left her house in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and never returned. A cold case for 50 years, Paula's story had been largely forgotten when Catherine Dykstra began looking for answers. A woman was dead. Why had no one been held responsible? How could a community give up and move on? Could there ever be justice for Paula? Captivating and expertly crafted, this is a timely, powerful look at gender, autonomy, and the cost of being a woman. And then finally, The Kissing Bug. This book might creep you out and send you to Google to find out if this bug is in your region. This is an investigation of infectious disease, poverty, racism, and for-profit healthcare, and the harm caused by decades of silence. Chagas, or the kissing bug disease, is more prevalent in the United States than the Zika virus. Today, more than 300,000 Americans have Chagas. The kissing bug tells the story of how poverty, racism, and public policies have conspired to keep this disease hidden, and how the disease intersects with Hernandez's own identity as a niece, sister, and daughter, a writer and researcher, and a citizen of a country that is only beginning to address the harms caused by Chagas and the dangers it poses. A riveting and nuanced investigation into racial politics and for-profit healthcare in the United States, The Kissing Bug reveals the intimate history of a marginalized disease and connects us to the lives at the center of it all. And then my real final slide is I can never resist plugging our new Norton Young Readers imprint. We had our first children's New York Times bestseller with Every Night is Pizza Night. And From a Whisper to a Rallying Cry by Paula Yu is a nonfiction title coming out in April for young adults about the killing of Vincent Chin in Detroit in 1982 and how it led to an Asian American rights movement. It's written for teens, but certainly relevant for adults too. And it's an event and a trial that not many people know about. You can see a recording of our Norton Young Readers Fall Winter preview that includes an interview with Paula Yu on my YouTube channel. And then also you can find digital ARCs on Edelweiss and NetGalley, and I usually have giveaways for print ARCs in my library newsletter. It's so great to be able to present to you from my living room in Queens, and thank you all for listening, and thank you to the Booklist team for putting this together.
Thank you, Golda, and another huge thank you to all of today's panelists. But before we let you go, we have a couple of minutes for questions. So folks who are attending, if you have questions, type them in the Q&A box and we'll start asking them. We've gotten a couple questions, just making sure that all these titles are in Edelweiss and NetGalley. Do you all three have used those two sites?
Sourcebooks does.
All right.
Yeah, they might not all be up yet. You know, like for the later summer titles, the galleys might not be ready yet, but they will all be on Edelweiss as soon as they're available.
Bloomsbury does. The only thing that we do not have on those sites are the Sarah J. Maas titles.
Yeah, I was totally going to ask you for a Sarah J. Maas galley, but I mean, I guess I just did, but I understand.
Yeah. They are kept under lock and key at the moment.
Love it. So let me ask you this. When you guys are hearing from your editors and your, excuse me, your fellow sales and marketing people, is there anything that stands out in the way that they talk about a book that you're like, oh, I need this for my library book group people? Like some keywords, if they say like the untold story or sisters fighting, like,
I think in our launch meetings, whenever an editor is just really passionate about the book, it's not even about the subject. I mean, whether you're personally interested in the subject title, but when the editor is so passionate about it, because at that point we haven't read it. And so it makes me excited to read it.
Cool. So, here's a question. I'll give you all a chance to plug your author talks if you have any coming up as part of ALA Midwinter in next week, a few weeks. I know.
Winter, I think it's probably about 2 weeks, and Sourcebooks does have 3 different panels that will be available in our virtual booth. One of them is Layla Saad, who wrote Me and White Supremacy, and then we have a new group called the Alpha Rockers, which is a singing group, and they have done a recording for us, and then we've got like 100 books in there and lots of galleys, so please come and visit.
Oh my gosh, music and galley party. I love it.
I know, seriously.
Yeah, this is Golda from Norton. I'll say we actually decided to pregame ALA Midwinter because there's so much happening, during ALA. So we're having a panel this Thursday on Zoom that's hosted by Harlequin, Workman, and Norton. And so my author from Tin House is Claire Fuller with Unsettled Ground. And once we get the attendee list, I can send out the registration link to everybody if you're interested, or I will also post it on the WW Norton Library Twitter account. And that's happening this Thursday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern.
Morning style. I love it. Does anyone else have any questions out in the audience? Don't worry, I have some dumb questions to ask. Let's see. Have you guys seen delays in printing or publishing because of current events? We'll call them euphemistically. I know, like toward the beginning of last year, there were a lot of delays, and I was wondering if you all saw the same thing this year.
Sourcebooks delayed a couple of titles last year, but not a lot. And we really haven't delayed anything as a result of kind of COVID-related problems. That said, if you are trying to reprint a book right now, we used to be able to reprint paperbacks in 3 to 4 weeks, and that time has literally doubled. So unfortunately, when we go out of stock, we stay out of stock a lot longer than we did before. And I don't see that getting better anytime soon, just given printing, shipping, there's just a lot of complications right now.
So everyone buying replacements, leave a little extra time. Do you think that folks read different stuff in the spring and summer than they do in the winter? Like book club wise? I mean, we had a fall and winter book club panel, and then today we're talking about spring and summer. Like, have you noticed there's something that people prefer to read when it's warm, or if you're in Chicago when the rest of the world is warm?
That's a tough question. I think we need to hear from book club members.
Yeah. All right. Okay, here's one. And then this will be the last one because I'm just throwing these things out at you. Pam tries to appeal to a broad range in library book discussions, as I'm sure a lot of folks do. Women and men, a variety of readers. Do you have guidance, or would you say it's a shot in the dark and hope? So do you have an idea I mean, you never totally know who a book is going to appeal to, but do you have an idea of a book, if it's going to have broad appeal or limited appeal, and who that might be limited to, or you just kind of something else?
I think from a Sourcebook side, we've definitely done titles that, to go back to the earlier question, I would call a beach read. And they're fun books, they're quick reads. They do tend to focus more around, three women who are in a book club together and the ex-husband ends up dead and they all try and solve it. I think it might be a little tougher appealing to men. And that's a really great question. I just think about the books that we actually publish and the ones that I've just talked about. And I think men tend to gravitate, and this is just such a sexist thing to say, towards, mystery titles. For us, that would be Poison Pen, thriller titles. My guess is, as much as I love Susanna Kearsley, there probably aren't a lot of men sitting around doing a book club with her. But I will certainly cede to Golda and Ellen if they have other thoughts on that.
I think definitely. I think even like in our presentations today, there's books that you said this would be good for readers of all ages, whatever it is. I mean, the first book I presented was Elderhood, and that book is geared towards aging. And so you're going to gear more towards older people. And so it really just depends on the book. Some books you can pitch for everyone, but some are geared more towards different age groups or interests. A lot of times there's things, especially like in history categories that are more niche. It just varies.
Yeah. And I think those niche books, I love when they seem to have like a really narrow appeal, but then suddenly everyone wants to read that one book about squid. That is always very exciting for me to see. All right. Well, thank you all for putting up with my questions and for answering the actual good questions from our participants. So let's move on to the next slide. All right, tomorrow all attendees will receive an email containing links to today's slide presentation, title list, certificate of completion, and video recording. For more about Booklist webinars, be sure to visit booklistonline.com/webinars, where you can view archives of past webinars and register for upcoming ones like the one you see here. And I also want to put in a special plug for a webinar we have coming up at the end of January called Everything You Want to Know About Reviewing for Booklist, but we're afraid to ask. So if there's any library workers in the audience who have thought about reviewing for Booklist, please check it out and see if it's something you're interested in. If you haven't already, be sure to check out Booklist Reader, where Booklist contributors post daily about all things books and library land. If you're not yet a subscriber, don't worry. Pair the page-by-page reading experience of print with the convenience of online access at booklistonline.com and lock in print, online, digital, and archive access by taking advantage of this special webinar offer to get Booklist for only $75. Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, and one more thank you to our sponsors, Bloomsbury, Sourcebooks, and WW Norton Company. This concludes today's webinar.